Is the matrix supposed to be the third assignment?
I don't really know. I don't remember what is what.
I see Ruby and matrix.
I think the third assignment is a powerful assignment.
My job is only to just publish things. The rest is up to you guys.
It's a powerful assignment. So there's a-
Andrew, anything you'd like to talk about? No, nobody does. Go ahead.
Change. So, changing behavior is kind of easier than changing thought patterns, the past inertia, trying to not waste too much energy countering past thought patterns.
Forgive my rather childish and ridiculous analogy, but imagine you have a companion, you've been with her or him or it or they or all those things that people talk about these days. And you've been together for about 5 or 6 or 10 years and you're very attached, since in all relationships, one person usually loves more, cares more, pays attention more to the relationship, and the other person is just a bit more callous, that's all. And so there comes a point where, whoever loves more has less power in the relationship. So they become more passive. They're able to, I suppose, take abuse more, and they're able to forgive more. So that's what happens in power relationships, which is everywhere. And so one day she comes to you and she says to you, I just don't want to be with you anymore. Now, since you don't have very much power in the relationship, because you love her more than she loves you, you try to ask if there are anything you can do, if there's anything you can do to make things work. And she says no. And maybe she's met someone else, maybe she wants to go to a convent and just, pray and all that. And so she packs her stuff and she leaves. And it's kind of like what we talked about last night. You've been with someone and you become, to some extent, habituated, addicted to the relationship, to the way they are, eating together, watching movies together, going on trips together. And so the moment she leaves, there is this great sense of loss. And with any loss, you're going to be very sad, very depressed, very lonely. It doesn't mean that you won't jump into bed with other people, but it's really, for the most part, it's to distract yourself from the reality of your life, which is you were planning to get married, have a family, this and that, and all of a sudden, all the narratives have been erased, and it's traumatic. And you're going to lose a lot of weight. You're going to be angry. I mean, that's what grief does. You kind of are forced to go through this divorce with everything you used to do. And divorce is always difficult with anything. You read books and, you highlight some passages, they sound interesting, but they really don't have very, very much application. I mean, as theories go, they're really good as ideas go, but they can't come down here. And change the way you think and feel and behave towards certain things. You go to workshops, you seek therapy, you take pills, you smoke, you drink, you just do all sorts of crazy things. And maybe you assume that you're over her now, and as you're driving, you see her jogging around the lake, and all of a sudden, the volcano of emotions just erupt. And you park somewhere and you begin to cry. And you begin to jog. And you chase her down and you say, hey, have you changed your mind? She looks at you and says, I don't even know who you are. So you go back to your car and, there's a church there. It's really nice with a beautiful cross that you should steal if you can. You start dating, but nothing works. And time passes. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years. I don't really know how these things happen. It's what we call the breakthrough. That you struggle to find answers, you struggle to find balance, you struggle to kind of put yourself back together. And nothing works, and time passes, and you're walking the lake, and you don't really think about this woman anymore. You kind of just engage in your own life. And all of a sudden, she appears before you. And you don't have any feelings toward her. You don't have any feelings toward the relationship. You've kind of found the pieces, you've put the pieces together, you've kind of accepted the fact that she did something wrong, you did something wrong. And as time has passed, you've come to also understand that it wasn't really a very good relationship. It is true that you loved more, it is true that you forgave and all that, but still, you've come to this place where you realize it just was not a relationship for you. But it took about 2-3 years, time to pass by for you to kind of blossom and mature at this to be the kind of man that you are now. And the truth is, I think all of us are victims to time. It can be very cruel in the sense that it doesn't pass very quickly. It's like you don't really want to be here. You keep looking at the clock. It's not interesting. It's not exciting. And so time moves very, very slow. That becomes your enemy. But let's just say you're at a party, your friends are there, maybe your family members are there, you haven't seen them for a while. And before you know it, 5 hours have passed. And you say, why? We have the saying in Persian, Chedir amadi chezud miravi. You came so late, you leave so early, So, when you ask about change, there is going to be a lot of struggle, inner struggle, as well as the inner struggle has to do with the emotions, the outer struggle has to do with you want to change certain outward behaviors. It's just going to be very, very, very tough. There's going to be ups and downs, and every time you want to get up but you fall, your confidence kind of shatters a bit more, your self-image shatters a bit more, your hopes and dreams disappear a bit more. And the truth is, I don't really know how people put themselves back together. I don't really know how change comes about. I think because this is a how-to culture, everyone out there has an answer. If you read this book and that book, you will overcome your divorce, the feelings that come with it. If you do ABCD, your son will stop smoking, or your daughter will go back to school, or your daughter will break up with this chap. So, and the thing is, I think most of the complex issues of life, no one really knows how they come about, how they can be fixed. I know that the ears of the people in this culture enjoy hearing, how-to lessons. What do I need to do to pass this class? Well, you can't do much. Just write your crummy essays, and if you have an instructor who is somewhat mature, he'll just give you an A because you're stupid, but knows that you need to pass the class. That's all. But the idea of change also suggests that someone looks at where they are and they're not happy. And because pain has a tendency of forcing reflection, and reflection has a tendency of pushing into the past, to kind of look at all the stories that you created for yourself. It's a house that you and I built. And then you say, I don't like the house that I've built. And I'm like 35 or 45 or 50. The problem with building all these different things for your life is that, it creates a good amount of habituation. And habituation means that, all of us become relatively comfortable even in abusive relationships. So what happens is you just become comfortable where you are. And that's something that Charles Darwin had argued about, that there is something about us, the sort of animals that we are. Regardless of how difficult your situation is, you will find a way to adjust and to cope and to survive. It doesn't mean that, and there comes a point where you just give up change. It's just too much, and you don't have the resources. And remember, change is like buying something. To buy anything, you need money. You need a savings account. You need a toolbox. The idea of change is good, but the actuality of change comes about only if you have the resources. Without the resources, it's going to be very difficult. But, as long as there is pain, it's kind of like having a toothache, and you try all sorts of medications, it just doesn't go away. And that pain will eventually force change. You get yourself in a car, you drive somewhere to a dentist shop, and you say, thy will be done. Whatever you think you need to do, just do it. And pain makes you passive. Pain makes you powerless, and you give power to the other person who sounds somewhat proficient, and you allow them to do whatever. That's what we talked about when we talked about cults a couple weeks ago. You're at a certain place in life where your life just is not going anywhere. You feel meaningless. You feel irrelevant. And there is some guy or gal out there that happens to have some magnetism, some charisma, ideas that are interesting. And naturally, you just gravitate towards them. And that's how things are. As long as you have pain, that whenever you're in a place of comfort, you're also in a place of forgetfulness. You don't ask big questions. It's something that Heidegger also talked about, being unto death, or Martin Luther, sudden death. Pain is very, very important. And one of the things that we'll talk about tonight about the Upanishads is that the only way transformation or change is possible, you have to have a teacher, and that teacher has to kind of inject a good amount of pain inside you. And one of the ways it's done is by making you look at your life and feel really bad about it. And it's something that Socrates had talked about some years ago. You and I, or maybe I just should talk about myself, I spend so much time taking care of my physical life that I completely forget about my soul. And in conclusion, he asks, have you no shame? And my answer to him is no. And that's how things are. Pain. And the problem with pain is we don't like it. It's too much. Remember that one of the 7 deadly sins is sloth. We enjoy comfort. Comfort in, to some extent, predicting our future. I'm going to come to class, I'm going to pretend as if the class is interesting, I'm going to write essays, and I'm going to end up with a C. We plan out our future. And then the final grade comes and it's an F. And all of a sudden now you're angry. So the only way that you will welcome pain is if you love someone or something more than the discomfort of pain. My brother had a friend, a colleague, he used to teach anthropology somewhere in the South. Then he got a divorce, I think. He started teaching at the American River College, computer science. He had his PhD in anthropology. And he had a beautiful way of playing the saxophone. So what had happened to him when he was teaching at the university is that he got news one day that his mother had cancer, but she lived in a different state. So he went to his boss saying that, I love my job, but my mom has cancer, I need to go take care of her. I need the semester off. He said, okay. I suppose at a certain point, all kids, when you're taking care of someone who is sick, there comes a point where you say, I just want my father or my mom to die. It's too much. Initially, there's a good amount of emotions and feelings you have towards the person that you care for. And like anything else, after a while, it just becomes anything else in life. You become very casual towards it. It doesn't mean that you don't have empathy. It just means that the cross has become a little too heavy, and you become far too casual with pain, with death, with your mom, all that. So he goes there thinking that his mom will pass in 6 months. She survives. He calls the dean again saying, my mom isn't dead and she's really sick. I need another semester off. Okay, another semester. Hello. And so it took her about 2.5 years. But the final semester, when he asked for another semester off, the dean said, no, you either come back or we just terminate your contract. And he had to make a choice. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the social sciences, 4-year schools, 2-year schools. Getting a job in philosophy, humanities, anthropology, sociology, history, they're very, very, very difficult. First, you don't find very many vacancies. And if you do find vacancies, job postings, let's just say in humanities or philosophy, you have one position, one opening, and you have about 200 applicants. So these are very, very rare positions to come about. And so you have to make a choice. Do I want to give up my position, tenure track, a secure job at this university, or do I want to give it up and take care of my mom, who's going to die? And once she dies, I'm going to be stranded. No, no paycheck, no health care, none of those things. Now, they're both painful prospects. He stayed with the pain caused by his mom. He didn't care for the job, And maybe there is a good amount of shame and guilt and those things involved, but I don't know. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make, if you love the pain, and you can't love the pain unless you love the thing or the person who has caused the pain. And all of us in this class have been in relationships, especially if you have children, and you have, say, some conflict with your spouse. Or maybe you don't have children, but you've been in the relationship for about 5 years and you just don't want to just walk away from it for like ridiculous reasons. And even though maybe he or she has accused you of things or wronged you in some ways, you're not just going to walk away. You'll make things work. She has caused you or he has caused you a lot of pain, but you realize the relationship is valuable. It's just a tiny branch of pain, and it's worth it. Because you love your companion, you love the life you've created with her or him. It's very difficult for us to fall in love with pain because we live in life. And life is not our friend. Life at every corner tries to beat you up in some shape or form. It's something that Freud had talked about. You have to get a job because you need to pay rent. And after some point you realize, I don't really care what sort of a job it is. I just need to protect my flesh. You have to eat food. You have to say hello to people you don't like. You have to do things that you don't enjoy. And add to it the injustice of politics, of society. The fact that you have to figure out a lot of questions that you may have and the complexities of life, but there are no answers. There is no book you can go to find all the answers to your questions. So all of us to some extent are stranded, And because life is a stranger to us and because we don't make peace with them, we ought not to. It makes it very difficult for us to kind of somehow cope with all the disasters that life just imposes on us. So after a while you drink or you smoke or you do therapy or you just do suicide. Or you come to a certain crossroad where you look at yourself in the mirror and you realize I've spent 30, 40, 50 years of my life and it's completely meaningless. Okay. Now, if I was to kind of make this a bit more personal and then we'll move on. I was 11 when my parents sent me to India. And even now when my parents and I talk about what they did to us, my father said, I have no idea what we were thinking. How could we send you to India at the age of 11 and your brother 10? Were we stupid? And then they realized that India is not really changing the way we function in school. They said, maybe we should send them to America. Okay. Now, my father at that time was about 49, 50. He retired. Now, his parents are there. His siblings are there. That's his culture, Iran. He's been there for about 50 years. He's now suffering because his kids are growing. He hasn't seen them for a while. He has no idea what's happening to his kids. Now, one of the things about Middle Eastern and African and Mexican, various cultures, how they kind of relate to their kids is that the kids are at the very center of their life. The kids are the sun, and the parents are like the earth, revolving around the sun. That's how intimate the relationship is, okay? And the idea of you're 18 now, get out, it doesn't work. You stay home until you get married, and then you move out. And when you move out, your parents buy you a house, buy you a car, buy your furniture, they do everything for you, okay? And when you move out, you just move out next door, and you visit them every single day. That's what moving out is. And so he had to make a choice. Does he want to come to America and be with his kids? Now, this is a guy who doesn't speak English. This is a guy who doesn't have degrees. He has 7th grade education, okay? Or does he want to stay home, back home, and just be with his family, with his people, with his culture? Now, because, let's just say, he loved his kids, he said, you know what, I'm going to leave my country, I'm going to leave my people, I'm going to leave my siblings, I'm going to leave my language and go to a foreign land. All because of my kids. And when he comes here, what does he do? He washes cars for about 20 years. It's a pain worth having because of his kids. If you can find a pain in which you can fall in love with, caused by someone, you'll be fine. In fact, it becomes a source of creativity and strength if you give it some time. Anyone else before we? No one? Yeah.
So, okay. Let's say you're a person who has a bad habit or have or addiction, and those things that like they cause you pain or they have given you painful experience. Can that pain actually change you? Like,
If he gets fed up, yeah. If he gets fed up, if your husband walks out, if your kids see you doing this, that causes them a good amount of hurt and disappointment, yeah.
it depends on how much
There was a movie some years ago with Farrah Fawcett, who's now dead. It's called The Burning Bed, I think. It was a true story made into a show. This guy asked her out. She said yes. He fell in love with her. She fell in love with him. He wanted to fool around in the car with her. She said, no, I can only do this when we get married. So no sex before marriage. Eventually, they married. Come to find that he's profoundly abusive physically and verbally and then emotionally. By this time, they have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. And he physically hits her, and she's all black and blue. And then she leaves to her mom's. He goes to the mom's house, apologizes, cries, and begs. She says, okay. And this goes on again and again and again and again. There comes a point where they have now moved into like a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. They no longer live in the house. And she can't take it anymore. He comes home one night drunk, and this is near the end of the movie. And he pours some gasoline on the bed, on him, on the entire 2-bedroom, and climbs out of the window. Fire everywhere, and he dies. She gets caught, goes to court. She's tried. She tells the story, and she's let go. And I guess your question is very much the same way, that you have a certain life, and there are certain things that are good, there are certain things that you want to change, but possibly you can't. As long as you're okay, as long as you're able to distract yourself from the bad habits, and once in a while they come up, kind of like what Pascal had argued, that you can do a lot of awful things in life, but on Sunday you go to church and you say, God, forgive me. And then you come out and say, oh, okay, I'm forgiven. Then Monday comes, you do the same old stuff, then you go back to church. So as long as you're able to kind of repeat the mistakes and then forgive yourself for repeating those mistakes, the habits will never go away. If on the other hand you come to a certain place where you make the mistake and you maybe kneel, pray, cry, and you want to kind of forgive yourself, you realize it's very difficult to forgive yourself at this stage. How it happened, no one knows. Okay? But if it happens, then maybe you have the possibility of making some changes, fundamental changes to your life. But you really need to get fed up. Now there is what we talked about last night, a shortcut and a long cut. The long cut is just live your life the way it is. and then you get to be 40, 50, 60, 70. The only thing you have now is this very powerful intellect, reflective abilities, where you can kind of look back at your life and be very sad about it. And maybe you will have some nuggets of wisdom for your grandkids or for your own kids, that this is the way I live my life, don't make my mistakes. The shortcut is someone walk into your life, like Angela Davis, like a Malcolm X sort of a fella, or a Mahatma Gandhi. And there is something about them that just shames you. They have a sort of presence that they force you to become a bit more aware, a bit more mindful. And then you become very attracted to those qualities. And it's what we talked about on the board the other day, where you want to occupy their physical space. You call Angela Davis every single day. She never replies. You just leave a message. And then you text her. And then you watch her on YouTube. And little by little, Angela Davis occupies more and more of your inner space. So when you go out with your friends and you talk about this and that, you realize you're just spitting out Angela Davis's name, every 5 words or 5 sentences. And then you're not as liked by your friends. That's the shortcut, the Angela Davis. There is someone out there who you begin to idolize. There is something about her that just beautifies the way you think about yourself, about life. Not without pain, of course. And then little by little, she's able to make changes. And instead of waiting for you to be 60 to be relatively okay with who and what you've become, you can reach that end goal by the time you're like 40. Angela Davis is kind of like a concentrated orange juice when you get it from the freezer at Safeway. You put, a tiny bit in and you put like 20 gallons of water. Yeah. But there is no how to. I can't tell you where to go to find someone like that. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Yeah, Ricardo. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like, regard to religion and 12 hours of life, how important it is.
Well, you don't have to, I think, pursue religion to live a healthy, balanced life. Religion is just one of those things in life, amongst many other things, that allow creativity, that allow reflection, that allow your life to kind of be looked at as something meaningful. You can be a great pianist, but I think the point is to be good at anything, whether it's religion or piano or writing or singing. It needs a lot of practice. It needs a lot of focus. You need to have a lot of passion, a lot of dedication. And the more passion and dedication you have, the more focus you have, the more you're willing to sacrifice all these other things that have the potential, the power to distract you. Religion just gives you a perspective, another tiny path to how you can live a relatively healthy life. And by healthy, I mean, you have to do a lot of work to inspire people through language. If you happen to be a great guitarist, for example, a pianist, you can do that in 10 minutes. But to be at that level, whether you're giving a sermon at a church or you're on a stage playing the guitar, what people don't see is that you got on the stage because you spend 20 years like a slave, day and night, practicing the piano. That people don't see. They don't see the labor. They only see the end product. You are this ripe fruit, and you can inspire. Okay. Now, the inspiration that you will get from a sermon is very much the same as the inspiration you get from listening to someone playing beautiful, immaculate piano. Because inspiration kind of cuts you like a butcher, who cuts the meat from the fat, What inspiration does, it kind of cuts you from your meat, from your flesh. Now, what is interesting about inspiration, once you have that particular moment where you have wings and you soar to the heavens, you will come back down and you will give $20 to someone who's homeless. And all of a sudden, inspiration takes a very physical form. The problem with inspiration is it's like the wind. It comes and it goes very, very quickly. Inspiration is very different than being proficient. Proficiency demands commitment. Inspiration is just an accident. And if you want to put that to test, 4th of July is around the corner. You're probably going to have some barbecue. Put some lighter fluid on charcoal and immediately put a match to it. It'll go up in flames. But about 20 seconds, everything will die. You'll see no fire. Now, put some charcoal, some fluid on the charcoal. Let it sit for about 5-10 minutes, then put a match to it. Then stand there with a fan. And then what you'll see is some charcoals now have a red spot. Now, if you don't keep fanning, the red spot will go away because you have too much black stuff. You have too much charcoal. If you keep fanning, there comes a point where this red stuff, okay, will now live inside the charcoal itself. And if you come back after 5 hours, or maybe 2 hours or an hour, the charcoal has turned into ash. So inspiration creates this fluid, lighter fluid, and this passion, this fire. If you have someone who can fan it, i.e. protect it, nourish it, then it can mature. But religion is not the only path, and neither is thinking or reflecting. You're just one amongst the many. Anyone else?
It's like the first story with Robert paid for they're just for food, didn't have much. It's chocolate, and stuff. It's, she's still inspired. She's still making work at the age she's it's just, it seems like such a battle to maintain that inspiration.
Yeah.
It does get lost.
It does get lost, and you have about maybe a 20 or a 30-year window before you find what you've become very good at irrelevant and insufficient. Even if you look at the Gospel of Judas, for example, he had a good time for about 3 years. He walked around, broke bread with his people, gave sermons, But after a while, I think he just lost interest. So everything that you enjoy, there is a window that once it's shut, it's never going to be opened again. Yeah. Inspiration has zero understanding in it. And to some extent, it's worthless. It's like all the Occupy movement, young kids being in the streets, or any mass movement. You're inspired, you just don't understand anything. And then after a while, you just become contaminated. Anyone else before we... Okay. Chris? Yeah. No, please.
Okay.
Shantae.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Our arranged marriages
Oh,
based
Jesus.
solely on prospects, like that's the only reason for it, or why people, I guess, exercise it. I guess like people who need money or earning profits or just wealth, basically. But is that the only foundation for an arranged marriage? That's the only reason someone introduced to that.
There are many ways to look at arranged marriages, some positive, some negative. If I was only to just focus on a couple of things about arranged marriages, I would say the following. At the age of 18, you run into someone, they happen to be somewhat attractive to you, and after 2 weeks, you go all the way up. This is the mountaintop, Everest, and you fall in love. And the truth is, there isn't anything higher or anywhere higher you can go. You've reached the ultimate, you know. Once the ultimate has been reached, the only place you can go is down. And that's what happens because love is in the hands of time, and time has a tendency of slowly just corrupting it. You become too casual, you become nonchalant, you begin to say silly things, and little by little, love just turns back into like, and then you just survive the relationship. And all this happens in about a month's time period. Arranged marriages is, and you hardly know the person. All you know is that you love. You're infatuated. And your brain chemistry has changed a little. Arranged marriages, first of all, you don't get a chance to... Let me do it this way. My sister was going to UOP, University of Pacific, I think. She was doing pharmacy. She had never dated. I think by then she was maybe 22 or something. She had contact with this guy through a family friend. They just had phone conversations, but the guy was very young, he was very mature, and he was a yes or no sort of a fellow. And we came to realize my sister is getting a little depressed, so we called the guy and said, don't ever call us again. Don't ever talk to my sister. Time passes. One of our friends, whose name is Ali, called my mom or something and said, I have a cousin, he's in Ohio, he's a dentist. We've told him about your sister, Sarah. What do you guys think? And, my sister was not getting any younger. She's 22, close to being 50. She says, yeah, why not? So he gets on a plane, he comes to our house. He's about 6'2". My sister is 4'9", maybe 5'2". She's a tiny thing. And so he had come with Ali, his cousin. And so they sit there for about, 4 or 5 hours, and Ali talks the whole time. Poor Murtaza didn't get a chance to say, this is like the guy who wants to marry my sister. He doesn't say anything. He can't say anything. His cousin has dominated the space. And so they exchange phone numbers, and he calls. And they talk for about 2-3 months. He had a job. He seemed like a nice guy. And I called the dental office where he was working. I said, do you have a guy named Murtaza Beheshtian? Does he work there, or is he a crook? He said, oh, no, the doctor is here. Would you like to talk to him? I said, no, I just want to make sure that this guy's legit. They hardly knew each other. They got married. Now, one of the things about arranged marriages is that you look at someone and you want to throw up. You just don't like them. But when you're forced to live with someone under the same roof, your feelings about them begin to change. And you are forced to understand certain things. And then, like anything else in life, as you grow accustomed to cancer growing inside you, you slowly begin to understand who this other person is, and you begin to like them. If not like them, you begin to at least tolerate them. And that tolerating them, after a while you say, I don't like him, I know, but where is he? Why is he taking so long coming back from Safeway? You begin to miss him. And then what happens is it takes about 20 years for you to actually come to a place and say, you know what, I think I actually love my husband now. But it took about 20 years of work. And it's something we'll talk about when we get to Confucianism. life really is short. For those of us who have some age on us, will tell you. Not that you're young, but you know. And so you want to make sure that your companion is like a good vehicle. Doesn't break down, doesn't get a flat tire, doesn't need a brake job. Transmission is okay, because you want to live a relatively peaceful life for the next like 30, 40, 50 years. And should you desire to have children, you want to make sure that your kids can come home and see relatively good role models, which these days are becoming much more difficult to find, both on the men's side as well as the women's side. Do arranged marriages have flaws? Absolutely. Some people never grow to like their companion. In many cases, there's a good amount of abuse, both physically, emotionally, verbally. Things have changed now in India, in the Middle East, but nevertheless, yeah. And you should always have someone pick a date for you. I like Chris. He came to this particular classroom about, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. It was 20-some, and he had just graduated from Berkeley. And he just said, I love philosophy. I love to think. And I asked him, what do you do? Are you going back to school? Oh, no, I don't want to go back to school. School sucks. Well, I know that. But I'm also like 40 years older than he is, 30 years. And I have been in his shoes. I know what he's talking about. I know how ridiculous school is. I know how unnourishing books can be. And when he tells me certain things about himself and his passion for philosophy, I'm not going to like entertain his thoughts. I'm just going to look at him and say, listen, go to school, come back here and teach. Straightforward. That's a good model to have. And I'm not talking about myself or him, just anything, We have a neighbor, and they have been sending their kid to this saxophone school for the past 10 years. Because the father loves Miles Davis. And it's interesting, because once you fall in love with something, you want to give that to your kids. You want your kids to also love something. This is a great job for someone like him. First, it's a place where you can kind of just play with ideas for about 5-6 hours a day. And that makes you profoundly focused on things. It robs you of friendships, sure. And especially if you happen to be relatively interesting in the classroom and semi-good as an instructor. You have the ears of like 20, 30, 40 people. They ask great questions. You can kind of creatively respond to them. And then you'll choose your companion accordingly. That if there is someone out there who does not like philosophy, doesn't like thinking, I don't care if it's Angelina Jolie, I'm not going to go out with him. And so, if you have a mom who loves you, who cares for you, and understands a little bit about capitalism, about the social structure of America, about certain communities of people, and she گلی که خون بدادم پیچ تابش ز آب دیدگونم دادم آبش به درگاه الهی کی روابی گل از ما دیگری گیره گلابش. That here you are my daughter. If you want to know how I raised you, sacrifice, blood, tears. I'm not just going to allow you to walk out, look at a guy and say, I love him. That's not going to happen because he's going to ruin you. And when he ruins you, he ruins me as well. Okay? So I'm going to protect you. I'm going to look out there and see if there's any guy worthy of you. Then I'm going to go to his parents and check out their culture. If the father drinks, if the mother drinks, if they watch porn, if they fight, if they don't do any of that stuff, say, okay, my daughter is gold. I don't mind giving it to a silver. And you check out the guy and say, okay, he may not be the most handsome of fellows out there, but you'll get used to it. Don't worry. You know, and I assure you, once you get pregnant, you don't really care who the hell this guy is. All you want to make sure is that he's got a good job, he brings some money, and there is health care. And he doesn't smoke or drink. It doesn't matter how much you love this guy. The moment you have a kid, he's like in the back seat, in the trunk. Good luck. Anyone else? Okay. I really don't want to talk about the Upanishads. But if you have no questions, I will. Anyone? No? Okay. Ricardo.
Mama and business involved and all that. Do you think that to some degree we're all broken? And if so, will we ever be able to have healthy successful?
Are we broken? Yes. The question is, who's broken you? Let's say you're watching TV and your mom comes, grabs you by the ear, slaps you, kicks you, punches you, and says, it's time for you to do your math work. She's broken you. I mean, you're there in pain, you're crying. She forces you to do something you don't like. And after 5 hours of crying, you finally finish writing your essay for this class. It always pains parents to be cruel to their kids. So once you come to her and say, here's mom, here's this goddamn essay, are you happy now? She looks at it and says, yes, now let's go to Chris and have some deep dish Zachary's pizza. She broke you, but now she put you back together. In life, there are many, many moments where you're broken by people that don't really care for you. And you get broken and you remain broken. You just better hope that your brokenness does not turn into trauma, because that will begin to live inside your soul. It becomes one of your main arteries and it just leaks everywhere in life. If you've ever had a good teacher, like playing the piano, that teacher will always break you, depending on how good they are, because they want perfection from you, and once your relationship with the teacher becomes a bit more intimate, they have no problem telling you how much you suck. But they also will have no problem telling you that what you did was really good, perfect, beautiful. So they break you, they put you back together at the same time. Eventually, what the Stoics, these are people who came after Socrates, what the Stoics and even what Jesus Christ and all the other religious heroes tell us is that if you can somehow find the kingdom within you, and your kingdom may be just playing the piano, your kingdom may be doing poetry, your kingdom may be just being a great father. Who the hell knows? People live in different kingdoms and they're very happy in them. If you become relatively self-sufficient, and by that you have enough self-knowledge of your physical life, of your emotional life, how they come about, what they do to your physical body, how your intellectual life is, your thinking patterns, then other people have less power to break you. And that's where you want to be. It's like a woman who's been in a relationship with this abusive man. He always puts her down, abuses her in all sorts of different ways. And my grandmother used to say that women are like flowers. If you don't take care of them, the petal just kind of falls and dies. Okay? And that's what happens in abusive relationships. Eventually, this person just withers away, and whatever this other person says impacts them in such a traumatic way. There comes a point where, whether it's a man or a woman in the abusive relationship, they say, I'm really tired of just being pushed around, bulldozed over every day, every minute. And they go to therapy, maybe they read books, and slowly they begin to kind of retrieve who they once were, very strong, very active. And there comes a point where the man comes home and tries to push her around, and she says, I don't really care what you want to do. I know who I am, I know what I am, what you do, what you say doesn't impact me. And she'll in fact just pack up and leave. And that's the place you want to go, or be. And that's, to some extent, really is the function of the creative arts, religion included in it. Because it's all about just liking who you are, liking where you are in life. Yeah, but, get yourself broken by someone you trust. Okay. Let me say a couple of things about the Upanishads, namely how teachers are made, and then how students are made, and then the relationship between the two, and the 4 different kinds of teachers, and therefore the 4 different kinds of students. This is so useless. So, let's do it. Okay. So if you're able to stretch your imagination to last night, we talked about the 3 stages that we occupy, the 3 worlds. There is the world of kama, pleasure. It's natural, it's organic, it has to do with your physical body. Then you get to a place where you say, getting a little tired of going to the park, drinking with my friends, watching TV all the time, being glued to my cell phone. I'm getting a little older, uglier, smellier. Maybe I should get myself back to school. Instead of working at In-N-Out, maybe I can go to Google. Instead of making $20 an hour, maybe I can make $200 an hour. And part of it really has to do with the fact that you have friends and you envy your friends for who and what they've become. If your friends are always like you, losers, well, you're never going to evolve. You're never going to mature. Okay? Unless you have a parental figure who cares for you, keeps shoving into your ears that your friends are losers, therefore you're a loser, makes your life a bit more valuable. Maybe that'll inspire you. But there comes a point, and remember, all these happen organically, and as long as you live in social world, there are going to be people that you're just going to be attracted to who and what they are and what they do. That envy is good. You need that. It's good to be jealous because it'll inspire you to become more than what you already are. It doesn't mean that all envy and jealousy are good. Sometimes it can work the negative way. Kind of like Aesop's fable, the sour grapes, where you want to be as good as your brother, but you can't. So when he's sleeping, you just strangle him to death. That sort of envy is not the best way to go. Okay? Now, so you evolve or you go to the next stage called artha. It's about going to school. It's about saving money. It's about having a different relationship with the way you think about things, with money, with your life, with your physical body. If at the karma stage you would sleep around with anybody, now you only sleep with those who can think well. Not necessarily marry them, you're not there yet. You still want to have fun with your body, but now you pick and choose very carefully. And that's what happens when you have power now. Okay, with power comes perspective, and you take advantage of the power you now possess in life. Okay. Now remember, when you live in the world of pleasure of the body, you have no choice but to create certain habits, certain ways of thinking about pleasure, certain places where you take your body to. Okay? There comes a point where you say, I have enough money, I've been selfish for a while, for some strange reason, I want companionship. I want a companionship that's meaningful, that's intimate, maybe even having a family. And you move into a place called Dharma, okay? Where you begin to not only become socially responsible, but you also become responsible for your parents, for your children, for your spouse, for yourself, the way you conduct yourself, so you could be a good role model to your community, to your kids especially. These three areas of life engage us from the moment we are born to the time we die. Some of you in this class know this much better than I. You wake up in the morning, you worry about rent, so you go to work at a place you don't like. And going to work at a place you don't like creates unpleasant emotions that you have to deal with. You come home exhausted. Maybe you want to read a book, maybe you want to hang out with your friends, but you can't because you're just so emotionally worn out. And you sit by the TV and you wedge out. And kind of like Groundhog, the movie, the days repeat themselves again and again and again and again. And you want a way out, you want change, but it's not going to be possible. You're not in the place or you don't have the resources to make changes. And then let's say you get tired of working at In-N-Out and you want to make your life a bit more meaningful, a bit more valuable. So you say, let me put myself to school. Well, the problem with school is that to get your diploma, you need about 4 years. And these days, getting a bachelor's degree, especially in the social sciences, they mean nothing. For any of you in this class who want to do this quick and easy, major in business, major in computer science, preferably from a school that has a big name like Berkeley, Stanford, and once you get your bachelor's degree, you can go to Google or Yahoo and get a job there, and you get paid about $300,000 a year. And then you can smoke all the weed you want. The good kind. And then when you get a job at these places, now you have more power. You have more spending power. And so you will begin to shop at Costco, at Best Buy, you will look for a house, you will look for a car, and you realize that your days are just passing by with just what they call retail therapy. Okay? When you come home, there is no one there. And then you realize it's kind of sucks being all alone. And let's just say you're now broken in a way that you're just not digestible for any human being. You're relatively healthy. And so you go on the dating scene and you eventually find yourself a companion. Now, relationships are tough. Remember, you spend the first 15 years of your life just having fun. Then from the age, say, 18 to about 25 or 30, you go to school. And then from the age, 30, by the time you have your degrees, when you have your job, to the time you find your job and you retire from it, you're like 65. And what you really want to do is retire at the age of 65, 70, and just slowly walk towards the sunset, i.e. death, without getting too sick. That's life. All of a sudden, something really awful happened in India. And it has plagued all of us ever since. Just having casual sex is not enough. Just making money is not enough. Just getting married and having kids and buying a house and buying a car is not enough. There is more to us than this. You know, there was a time you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm a mom, that's great. I'm a dad, that's great. I have a job, that's great. Now you have everything and nothing is great. 60% of the American population are depressed. That's a huge number for a country that's so rich. And so they came up with this ridiculous word, Atman. It's kind of like Jesus coming forth saying, why do you guys go to the synagogue all the time? There's a church inside you, the kingdom of God. Imagine, you come from the Jewish tradition. You, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they've all been going to the synagogue. They all look at the Torah, the scriptures, and they say, this was written by the fingers of God himself. It's sacred. All of a sudden, this guy comes forth, Jesus, and says, you know what? Why do you guys go to the synagogue? Why do you believe the ink? Why do you believe what you hear? Why not just figure things out for yourself? The kingdom of God lives inside you. You don't need to go to the synagogue. All of a sudden, he makes the synagogue irrelevant. He makes the Old Testament meaningless. Like Moses, that's fine, but he's not sufficient. Come follow me. And that's what the Hindus told us. That your body is not enough. Getting a degree is not enough. Buying a house is not enough. Getting married is not enough. Now all of us walk around with this idea in the back of our heads. I have all this money, but I'm not happy. I'm married, I'm not happy. I got kids, I'm not happy. It doesn't matter where you go. All of a sudden, the human mind is plagued with unhappiness. Why? Because now he's at a stage where he has to look for something, a self. Now, the problem with this self is that it's under an avalanche of garbage, according to them. Whatever you have done from the age 0 to 18, you have stories. You have trash. That trash covers your soul. You won't see it. Maybe when you were 6 months old, or a year old, or 2 years old, or 3 years old, you could actually have a belly laugh. You laughed from your soul. But as you got older, as you got more mature, as you became engaged in life, as life became more involved with you, you didn't have belly laughs anymore. Now you just have like tiny, grins once in a while. Face opens, ha ha ha, and that's it. And once in a while, you look at the old pictures, you look at the old videos, and you say, I used to laugh. What the hell happened to me? And then you go to school. You get more trash in school. Because now you have information. You have data. You don't know what this data is. You don't really know how it's applied in real life. Okay, so you know John chapter 3, verse 16. And you can spit it like a parrot. Do you know how difficult it is going to be for Jesus to walk into your life and say, listen, you need to forget everything you know about the New Testament. And if you're familiar with the works of Dostoevsky, he will tell us that if Jesus was to come back and knock on your door and tell you, you've been waiting for me, I'm here, you would crucify him because he would not like the Christianity that you practice. You also gain a good amount of experience. And remember, whatever experience you and I gain in life, it becomes part of our identity, who you are, what you are. It took a long, long time for Malcolm X to realize that being a human being has nothing to do with your skin color. That whoever knocks on his door, white, black, or white, they're welcome, as long as they can be a good student of his. So the Hindus argue that you and I are like onions. For those of you who cook, you know what onions are, right? Now, when you look at an onion, what do you see? You see 100 layers. And what the Hindus tell us is, you know what all these layers or skins are? They are the masks that you and I wear because of the sort of life we live. So when you go out on a date, you wear one mask. When you go to a church, you wear a different mask. There was this wonderful book written by a radio host some years ago. I had a student a decade or so ago. His name was Paul. He got a job, in fact, at Zachary's. But because he gave a pizza away to his friends for free, he got fired. There is a book, it's called A Knight in a Rusty Armor. Now, first of all, it's a very thin book, about maybe, 100 pages. Maybe you can find the PDF online. It's a really nice read. To some extent, really, it's our condition. It's the sort of animals that we become. You're just a guy tending to your farm, to your family, to your kids. There's a fight out there, and you grab your sword and you go out there and you destroy everyone. And all of a sudden, someone goes to the king and says, you know, there's a guy. He's not a soldier of ours, but he fights really well. And you get called in. There is the king. He says, okay, I want to see you fight. So you're in the stadium, and now you're fighting 20 guys. And the king likes what you do. After you're done, you take a shower, you go to the palace. He looks at you, you kneel before the king, and he knights you. And for the first time, you wear something you've never worn before, an armor. Who has knighted you? The king. And so what you do as one of the favorite knights of the king is you go out there on the battlefield, you kill a lot of people, and you come home to your family. And on one occasion, this idea pops into this knight's head. I have to go back to the battlefield in the morning. Why do I need to remove my armor? I'll just put the hose in it, go like this a little, and I'll just wash off. And that's what he does. And he goes back to the battlefield, comes back home, does the same thing again. And one day he goes to remove the armor, but the nuts and bolts have rusted now. They won't come off. The only thing that he can do is just remove the visor so he can see his wife, his kids, they can see his eyes. There comes a point where even the visor won't move. One day his wife comes home and says, you need to get rid of this, man. I didn't marry RoboCop. I want to hug you. I want to lay with you. I want my kids to see you, to kiss you, to hug you. What's wrong with you? But arrogance has now overtaken the knight. I wasn't like this. Temperamentally, I am shy and reserved. If some of you have seen my arrogance coming out every minute or so, there is a reason for it. I am drunk with power. I have degrees. I have this job. I am the only full-timer. I actually think I do a relatively good job. More arrogance. This is what happens when you get drunk with power. I'm no different from Gilgamesh, and I haven't met my Enkidu yet. So the knight says, I don't need you as my wife, and I don't need the kids. I am the knight of the king. The only opinion that matters is the king's opinion, and he loves me, and that's sufficient for me. And the wife says, I'll give you 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, we leave. He doesn't take his wife seriously. He comes home after 2 weeks and everything is gone. For the first time, he understands what loneliness means. And loneliness means the following. You can't do anything with your power. It can't buy you companionship. You can't escape depression just because you have knowledge. You can't go out there and tell people that you have degrees. Nobody cares. You don't even care. That's what loneliness is. It's dark. And what happens when people get too lonely and too depressed? They sit. Their body is useless. They have no hope, no dreams, no imagination. And he goes to remove the armor, but everything is rusted. It's like when you say, I want to change. You want to make changes, but the habits, whatever they may be, they simply don't come off. So he prays, and prays, and prays, and prays, and all of a sudden, this magician called Merlin comes down. And Merlin doesn't make things easy. He says, you need to go into the house of silence, and you need to sit there for a while. You know, it's one thing to not eat for a day or so, and your entire system just shuts down. You don't have the energy to think, to talk, to go anywhere. You can't move your body. That's what fasting does. The house of silence, though, that you have all these, your belly is full, you know, but your past no longer speaks to you. You want to take your body to a bar, go around the lake, but your imagination says, it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you hear, nothing out there is interesting or attractive. You want to plan for your future, but in darkness and depression, there is no future to be had. It's what they call suicide. So he sits in the house of silence. Somehow he needs to quiet down. He needs to forget or not care anymore about being a knight. He just wants freedom now. Freedom from arrogance, freedom from pride. I had a friend, David Long, at Sac State. I used to be a student for a while, then we became colleagues. We used to go, in Sacramento, we used to go to Famous Kebab. It was a Persian restaurant. And we would go there at about 11, and we'd leave around 7 at night. And he would talk most of the time. And he called our gatherings pity parties. It was just sad. And at the end of every gathering, we would say, I want to find a teacher. I want to be a student. But first, there is no one out there who's interesting. Second, I don't even think I have the capacity to be a student anymore. I'm far too arrogant now. I can't silence my mind. I can't find the innocence and simplicity I once had. It's like I can no longer respect anyone and their thoughts and ideas about things because everybody's so simple. As he sits in the house of silence, little by little, slowly, the nuts and bolts come off. And then he's moved into the house of wisdom. And the point I'm trying to make by telling you the story is the following. The Indians tell us that as you move through life, experiences give you new skin. I'm black, I'm white, I'm a doctor, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, I'm a this, I'm a that. I have trauma, I have emotions, I have pain. Language, emotions create all these layers, all these faces that you and I wear. And then you get to a point in life, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I don't like what I see. And you want to change, but you have no idea what path you need to take, what steps you need to take to get rid of all the masks that you and I have accumulated over the years. So the self, which is untouched by sex and drugs, untouched by power and education, untouched by marriage or having children, it waits underneath this avalanche of garbage. It waits and waits and waits. Sometimes it just dies and disappears. Sometimes there are certain people who say, you know what? I am tired of the city life. I want to find an enkidu. I want to be naked. I want to be around someone who's naked. Naked in the sense that they're like childlike, they're innocent, they're simple. That inspiration removes all the things that you and I cling to. You know, sometimes you walk in your house and everything is so cluttered, but you read some book or you watch some movie or just innerly inspired. You say, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of all the trash I see. And you won't even think about selling them on Nextdoor or eBay. You just put them in the front. You say, I just pray to God that someone comes and takes all of my cars. Now, so let me say a couple of things about teachers and then students. I'm just winging this as you leave this class and read books and become more mature. I'm sure you can look at this stuff in ways that I can't. Your way would probably be much more mature, much more refined, complete. Beethoven is not a good teacher. He's a great musician. He's just not a good teacher. Because he didn't have to give anything up. Jesus is not a good teacher. Why? It is right for you and I to live in the world of pleasure, i.e., karma. It is our right. You don't need to sit home and read. As a kid, you need to be on the swings. You need to watch TV. You need to steal. You need to lie. You need to play video games. You need to have friends. And you need to go to school. And you need to be spanked by your parents. And given lots of timeouts. That creates personality. It creates identity. It creates attachment. Then you get to be 18. You're a bit more responsible now. You go to school. You take classes you hate. Listen to instructors you despise. And you suffer and you sacrifice for the next 4 to 10 years to get some ridiculous degree. Very helpful. Your skin grows thicker. Your identity becomes stronger. Your personality becomes more layered. You become more attached. You become more arrogant. You get lost in life. Then you look around and you see everyone holding hands. And you covet that. You desire that. So you get married. Or you'll just have a roomie. And you have a couple of kids. And you will love your companion. And you will love your kids. And you will slave away at your job. And you will save money to buy them the best of things that life can afford. There is no soul to you. You're just a very healthy, physical animal. You've had the pleasure, you've had the sex, you've had the smoking and the drinking, you've watched movies, you watch porn, you've gone to school, you've got the degrees, you're now married, and you're a parent, and you take care of your parents. That's a rich life. And by the time you're 30, 40, 50, you have conquered 3 worlds. The world of Kama, the world of Artha, and the world of Dharma. You are a self. Now comes the magic. The stuff I just told you, the Kama, Artha, and Dharma, what people usually go through, none of this Jesus went through. And because he didn't have attachments to the world of Kama or Artha or Dharma, he doesn't understand loss. He doesn't understand how difficult it is to overcome attachments. Every single one of us in this room, we are attached to things. Our kids, our spouses, ourselves, our cars. It takes a lot for us to give anything up. A good teacher lives life initially. And then comes the breaking point. And the breaking point is this. The call. I'll tell you a couple of stories. I shared with you that I ran into this man named Hussein. But my story is not interesting. I'm going to tell you a story that's far more interesting than mine, and that's my cousin's. Another guy whose name is Hussein. So we go to Hussein's gathering. Now let me tell you a few things about my mom's cousin. Married, kids. He worked for Pac Bell, making over 150,000. 1980s. That's like a couple $1,000,000 a year. That's how much money was worth way back then. We go to Hussein's gathering. We are sitting, Hussein is talking. It's about 2 in the morning. I had worked at the car wash from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. We go to Hussein's house at 7:30, and it's 2 in the morning. I whisper into Hussein's ears, Hussein, please, let's go home. I'm tired. I need to wake up at 6 in the morning, go to the car wash. So, Amir, be quiet. And Hussein is 10, 11 years older than I am. I said, okay. I shut my mouth and continue to sit respectfully. It's now 3 o'clock. So Hussein, my eyes are burning. Can you please go? 10 minutes. Okay. So eventually, thankfully, we get in the car and we're leaving. I said, Hussein, what is wrong with you? I'm exhausted. Can't even drive. He says, I have to tell you something. What is it? While we were listening, I heard a whisper in my right ear. Okay? that whisper told me, follow this man. Don't lose him. Follow him. Now, I was a kid. I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. It's a nice story. But what I didn't know, from that night on, he went to Hussein's house every single night. And his relationship with Hussein and his relationship with Masnavi, the book that he began to read, was so intense that he began to have strange experiences. The call from nowhere. You have dreams related to someone you have met. It got so intense, he lost contact with his wife. He just didn't want to be around her. And he abandoned his kid. Why? You're now invited to find and have a relationship with yourself. That is what you're looking for now. Now, he may be completely ridiculous, stupid even, but that is the message that he received, the first stage, the call. Now, as an ordinary human being, when you get a call, a revelation of sorts, you want to go back and put that experience within the world of karma. Say, how can I make sense of this? But the world of sex, drugs, drinking, pure entertainment will not give you answers. You put that within the framework of your education. I read The Dark Night of the Soul, written by St. John of the Cross, but that's ink on paper. This is something I experience with my soul. It makes no sense. He wants to talk about this with his wife, but once you have an experience that's intense, any kind of experience that's intense, how can you put it into language? How can you make sure that you're not being misunderstood? And when you have intense experiences, when you have trauma that lives inside, remember, trauma can be positive, it could be negative. If you run into a Jesus Christ, that's a traumatic experience. Initially, it's going to be painful, negative, but if you stick with him, it'll be positive. Snoop Dogg, it's a great traumatic experience. He's a celebrity. He will plunge you to hell. So, the call comes in all these strange ways, and we don't really know what to do with it. I don't know how it happens. I don't know who's worthy of all of a sudden running into someone that inspires them, and they're willing to sacrifice everything that they have, including their own identity, their past, their personality, to follow them. Now, what happens, the next stage is what we call search. When this experience happens to you, it's like you go to Pete's, all of a sudden you look at some person and they are so profoundly attractive to you, and then you say, okay, let me just go get my coffee and then I'll find a way to say hello to them. The moment you turn around, you realize they're gone. And then you forget about your coffee, you begin to look around, and you go outside to figure out where this person went, try to follow them. That's the search. A call brings about a good amount of passion, a good amount of desire that turns into want and then need. And whenever you need something, You begin to look for resources, tools that you can use to obtain, to touch, to taste what created this attraction. Okay? The search is going to be difficult. Why? Well, look, if I'm attracted to a woman, that desire can be satisfied by going to a woman. If I envy my brother because he's just graduated and I don't have any degrees, I know how to satisfy that desire. I can get myself to school, take some classes, be committed, be disciplined, and after 4 years, I have a degree. If I am lonely and I look out there and there are people holding hands, I say, that's the way you get yourself out of loneliness. You find yourself a companion. If on the other hand, the sort of questions that I have nothing to do with my body. In other words, I'm not looking to hold hands with anyone. I'm not looking to go to school. I'm not looking to make money. All I know is that there is this yearning, this longing that I have inside, that the physical world has no answers for it. I don't know if any of you in this class have ever suffered from severe depression. You could be sad once in a while. You could be sorrowful once in a while. But it's a storm that passes. But when you get depressed, you turn on the TV, then you break it. You open a book to read, then you trash it. You call your friends, then you disconnect. You turn on the light, you hate what your senses have given. They bring in all this information, you say, nah, I don't like anything that my senses are bringing in. You shut everything down. In fact, everything shuts down automatically. And though it is daylight, you live in darkness. When we talk about spiritual call, it means that there is nothing that the physical world or your physical body can give you that can bring some solace or comfort or rest. And it's not going to be a clean divorce. You can't simply walk away from your spouse. You can't simply walk away from your kids. You can't simply walk away from your education. It doesn't work that way. Like the knight in the rusty armor, what we have inside us, the stories, all the psychological narratives, all the intellectual narratives, they make us who we are. It's very difficult to disconnect from them. So you live 10 hours in psychological darkness where nothing pleases you. You hate everything. But it doesn't end there. Because you say, why is my wife happy? I want to be happy. I want to go and pick up the kids. I want to be good to my wife. I want to have long conversations with my friends. I want to go out with my friends and have some drinks. I want to have fun. And yet the call has made a complete mess of you and your life. There is no place you can go where the call doesn't show its face and begin to ask you big questions. What are you doing here? Why are you laughing at this stupid joke? This class is nonsense. Your life is nonsense. Divorce. Walk away. Now, the call has a tendency of forcing a complete divorce from the world of pleasure, power, and relationships. In other words, what the call will say is kind of like what Jesus says. Sit next to me because I'm fire. And I will burn everything on the inside as well as the outside. You will walk into life, but life has nothing to offer you. Only me. I am Abraham. I am the light. I am the bread. Your dependency will only be on me and me alone. Now imagine you're married. Imagine you have a job. Imagine you have all these responsibilities and obligations. And imagine now you have fallen in love with the person who has inspired the call. How the hell do you go back home and be okay with your companion, be okay with your kids? How do you live with the friction, with the conflict, the yes and the no, the positive and the negative? And the truth is you can't. Now, the struggle. You want to figure out what the hell is happening on the outside, and you also want to figure out why you've become such a jerk to everyone in your life. And people will punish you. Your parents will come to you and say, honey, what the hell are you doing to yourself and to your life? Go out with your kids. Have a good time. Be good to your companion. Why do you sit in your room and just read? What the hell is wrong with you? And you want to, you just can't. You have lost the ability to find pleasure in life. If that is a little difficult for you to grasp, if you love your mom, for example, or you love a brother or a sister or a companion, or you love your child, and your child dies, where do you go to find comfort? Eventually you'll find it, because that's what time does. Who can give you comfort? Where can you go? You have lost your identity. It's like the onion, all the skin has been removed. And you know what you are now? Nothing. How can anyone survive nothingness? And don't listen to the Buddhists. You know, the goal is to be nothing. Empty your mind. It doesn't work that way. Don't be gullible. Now, the search, I don't know where people go. I mean, if you're wondering why people join cults, it is really out of desperation. Okay? The next stage is struggle, if you can read that. It's kind of like some of you unfortunate folks in this room. You're tired. It's been a long day. Maybe you got kids. You want to go home. You've been working all day. You just got to keep your eyes open. You got to pretend, and all the stuff takes energy. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle to wake up in the morning when you know there is nothing out there that can nourish you. Remember the story of the salmon fish? Right? You have to go against life. And that is what this journey is all about. Life is there to put you to sleep. The call wakes you up. Life wants to bring you, swallow you back in. There is something about you that says, life can no longer make me. I don't care for life. Now, there is the fourth stage, and I don't really know how it happens, or why it happens, or who's worthy of it. It's called the breakthrough. The breakthrough is so once you get the call and you begin to search, you realize that you live in the desert. Where are you going? I'm just kidding. You live in the desert. And desert becomes symbolic of all those students who are somewhat earnest, sincere, honest about the quest. You have Jesus leaving everything for about 18 years. You have Moses finding himself in the desert for a number of years. You have Muhammad walking into a cave. You have Malcolm X walking away from everything. You have the Buddha walking away from his son, from his wife, from his parents, from his culture, community, and just sitting somewhere and breathing in and out. The desert life. Your friends are scorpions, are rattlesnakes, vultures. The world can't nourish you at all. If you're able, have the capacity to live in the desert, scorching sun, i.e. the inner emptiness, for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, if you are lucky. And again, I don't know how this happens, there is the breakthrough. The breakthrough is all of a sudden, in a moment, you begin to understand everything that you have the capacity to understand. It's like you accept. You understand the meaning of your pain, your struggle. You understand the nature of the physical world. You understand how emotions come about. Maybe you get a glimpse, you get a chance to see the face of God, if God has a face. And you have some relatively unusual experiences. Now, there is a problem at this stage. Remember, you were poor and you were hungry. You lived in the desert for all these years. Now you have power, breakthrough. Now you've seen things. Now you've experienced things. Now you're intoxicated. There is a brand new self that's born inside you. I don't know if any of you in this class have seen the movie Experiment. The Experiment, it's actually a real experiment that took place, I think, at Stanford. It's about giving about 20 people about $1,000 each, and all they have to do for a couple of weeks is some people will play the character of being prisoners, and some people will play being guards. In the movie, I think his name is Forrest Whitaker, right? He is the guard. And if you look at pay attention at the very beginning of the movie, he's a guy who's got nothing. He's a Bible thumper. He just reads the book, the Bible. He's taking care of his old mom. He's unattractive, okay? He has basically zero life, zero confidence. But something very interesting happens to him as he's pretending to be the guard. He beats someone up. And all of a sudden, he has an erection. Power. And all of a sudden, this was only supposed to be an experiment, but for him, he gets drunk because he is, for the first time in his life, he has power. And he takes himself very seriously. And he actually beats people up. He kills one of them. It's only at the end of the movie where he is reminded this was only an experiment. You have a rich world of karma, pleasure. You've had a rich world of artha, education, money, power. You've had a rich academic life. You've had a rich family life. Then you realize they all suck. They create this thing called Maya, illusion. You may be a father, but when you die, you will be forgotten. And that's something we didn't talk about when we talked about Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh knows that everyone is forgettable. Your kids will forget you. I will forget this class, and you will forget me. And the longing that lives inside Gilgamesh is, I want my life to be a certain way where I can live in the hearts and minds of people forever. But that's an extraordinary life to have. And where do you go to find that sort of a life? I'm not a Malcolm X or a Mahatma Gandhi. I'm some chump in Oakland. If you're able to tame this newfound power, if you're able to curb the intoxication of using and abusing the power you have, then what happens in the last and final stage is what we call the return. You go back home. And when you go back home, you realize that people live in mostly 3 stages. Some people don't have the capacity to go to school. They just want to have fun in life. The best thing you can do is educate them as to what sort of funds will benefit them long term and what sort of fun will hurt them. If you have the power to inspire them to go to school, to get a job that pays well, more power to you. Okay. Now, the return is ultimately the expression of a really, really, really good teacher. Why? He knows the temptations and all the pleasures that come by the physical body. He knows the pleasure that comes with money, with house, with cars, with going to school and having degrees. He knows the pleasure that comes with having a wife or a husband and a family. He or she has also experienced the fact that all of these experiences are completely meaningless. Important, but meaningless for him or her. So a good teacher is seasoned by life. And Mozart can be a good teacher because he'd never experienced attachments. There's nothing to give up. If you read the Jesus story in the Gospels, when he comes back home to Nazareth, he doesn't go to his mother's house. He doesn't go to Mary and say, Mom, I'm sorry I just left without any notice. It's been about 18 years. Hi, how you doing? Where's Dad, Joseph? He doesn't say that. He just goes straight to the synagogue and tells the Jews that they suck. So should any of you in this class ever desire to go on a spiritual quest, before you actually take that journey, look at the person who's inspired you. Ask them if they've ever had sex. Ask them if they've ever gone to school, have had money, cars, houses. Ask them if they've ever been married and had kids. Ask them if they've ever experienced having everything for them rendered meaningless. Ask them if they've ever lived a desert life, if they've ever been depressed. If they answer all of your questions with a yes, that's a good teacher. Because they know that if you want to prosper in life, you need to make sure that your physical life is well taken care of. That your emotional life is solid. Because you need a lot of love, a lot of faith, and a lot of trust on this quest. Now, let me tell you another story. Is it 9 yet? Now, I'm sorry, Wolf.
I was just gonna say a word.
Yeah, it's a good word. I can't pronounce it well, so I don't use it. It's like vulnerable. So I just don't use it. Maybe I should. So So now that you know a little bit about, relatively speaking, what a good teacher looks like, let me now speak of how students are made. You don't become a student by enrolling in a class. Sometimes I get emails, from my online classes where people say, "I'm your student in your Humanities 30A." And, the second line of my response to them is, "I'm sorry, you're just taking this class. You're not a student of mine. You're enrolled in this class. That doesn't make you a student. It just means you're taking the class." So, everybody has a life. And every life has some poverty in it and some privilege or richness in it. And no one is going to go out there and say, "Okay, today I'm going to go out there and look for a spiritual teacher." Doesn't work that way. I mean, you have to be stupid to wake up and say, "Today I want to be spiritual." It doesn't work like that. It's just going to be another day. You go to school, you go to work, you walk to Pete's Coffee, you run around the lake, you go to the gym, you go swimming. So you have this kid who's about to go to a concert given by Beyonce and Taylor Swift. It's a duo. And maybe Snoop Dogg. But we all live in Oakland. That's not a surprise. Okay. Fireworks, huh?
Yeah, they're fireworks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
just keep listening. Oh,
So this guy wakes up, takes a shower, irons his clothes, shaves, looks really, really good. Calls his friend and says, "I'm walking to your house, and then we'll walk to the stadium." And so he goes and picks up his friend, and they're walking. And they see a crowd gathered at this location. And Bob looks at Jack and says, "Let's stop by, see what's happening there. Maybe there's a fight. Conor McGeorge versus Yusuf Ali Khan." And so they stop by, and Bob, sticks his head in. It's not UFC. It's some guy sitting on some chair and giving a sermon of some kind. Jack becomes curious because Bob is a little delayed in coming out, peeks in, and hears all this talk, and he says, "Yuck." Looks at Bob and says, "Let's go, we're going to be late." And Bob says, "Just give me another minute. This is interesting." Remember, the intention was to clean up and go out there and have fun. Listen to people singing and drinking and smoking, dancing. As this guy continues to talk, Bob begins to feel things. He doesn't know why he's feeling these things, but he likes the feelings. And he doesn't generally like to think deep thoughts, but for some strange reason, he enjoys what he's hearing and what he's thinking about. And Jack says, "Bob, let's go." And Bob says, I don't know. Why don't you go? I'll join you there in like 10 minutes. And Bob is just glued to what this guy is talking about. He forgets about Beyonce. He forgets about Justin Timberlake. He forgets about dancing and smoking and drinking. He's like just listening to this sermon and has consumed all of his being. And he's been sitting there without food for like 5 hours. And then the talk comes to an end. And Bob waits for the main hall to empty a little, then goes to the guy whose name is like Jamal and says, listen, I don't know why, but I really enjoyed what you were talking about. Will you take me as a student? He says, of course. Come tomorrow and we'll do the paperwork. It doesn't work that way, but nevertheless. Okay. So Bob goes in first thing in the morning at 6. I am ready to listen. Oh, no. You said you want to be my student, right? Yeah. Well, you know, the basement, you have some toilets. Can you go clean them? I'm sorry? You know I have a PhD. I wasn't coming here to clean toilet bowls, man. I came here to listen to you talk. There is something about you and there is something about the way you talk. So yeah, I understand all of that. Thank you for the compliments, but toilet bowls, please. It's a very strange request, but the guy says, okay, should I go and clean the toilet bowls or should I just go home? Because this guy is ridiculous. He goes down and cleans the toilet bowls. Why? Because there must have been something that he was listening to for 5 hours. And there must have been something profoundly intimate about the ideas, about how he felt about this man, that made Bob passive. It is true I have degrees. It is true that I need to be respected. It is also true that I like this guy. In fact, it's very strange. Dare I say, I love him. He says, clean the toilet bowls. I came here for a sermon, but it's okay. Maybe I'll just do the bowls today. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. He says, I'm ready to listen. No. Toilet bowls again. The second thing you need to know about good teachers, they never, ever make things easy. If you have worked really hard to earn $20, you're not going to give it away easy. You will look for a worthy customer. For those of us who have kids and we work hard for our money and we go to Costco or Target and they jump to the toy aisle and they want a toy that costs like $150 because they have no idea what money means and how it comes about. He says, honey, it's too much. Buy something under $1. That's what good teachers do. They're never going to give you valuable things. They make you wait. This guy continues to wash toilet bowls for the next 2 years. Why would anyone suffer like that? If you don't love someone like the way Bob loves Jamal, you're never going to sacrifice your dignity, your time, your energy. You must love him. Will he or she turn out to be counterfeit later? Maybe. Or, at that particular moment in time, you enjoy the presence of this man and you're willing to sacrifice who and what you are and what you have. For 2 years, he washes the toilet bowls. And he continues to do so because of one simple reason. He imagines or assumes that once the 2-year time frame is over, he'll be allowed to the lecture hall. And then he can sit and listen. 2 years pass by. He goes to the teacher and says, time is up. Can I come and listen now? He says, yes, of course, but the kitchen, we make food for everyone at the end of the sermons. You need to wash the kitchen floor. Well, for like tonight only? I'm sorry, for 1 year. When am I going to be allowed to listen to you talk? All of us, myself included, assume that our ears are mature enough and our eyes are mature enough to read the Gospels and grasp the nuggets. And good teachers know that everybody has a past. Good teachers know everybody has psychological narratives. You take what is new and you change it to a way that fits you. You mess everything up. You were abused by your ex, and you assume that every guy who walks in your life is going to abuse you. And even if you go out with a saint, he will always going to impose and project what your past has been. And good teachers, the first thing they want to make sure is that their time and their energy is not wasted. Now remember, you're not going to endure this if you don't love, and if you don't have passion for this man, and if you don't have faith and you don't have trust, and if you don't have a fertile imagination, that after a year of cleaning the kitchen, I'll be allowed into the lecture hall. A year passes. Now again he goes to the teacher and says, am I now able to come to the hall? Well, you know, when I'm giving sermons, people become thirsty, and then we have to make tea, and then give them tea. Your job now is to make tea. Well, how long is that going to be for? God damn it. About 6-7 months. The moment you feel yourself ready and worthy, you are going to be rejected. Students need to be educated in humility. Six months pass by, then he goes again and says, am I now allowed? But what you can do now, once the tea is made, bring it to the lecture hall and give it to people. Another 6 months pass by. Then the teacher looks at this kid and says, who's now a grown man, I suppose, says, listen, now you can come and sit in the lecture hall, but way in the back. Now, when you sit way in the back, and way back then in the 8th century in the Middle East, there are no microphones and there are no speakers. In fact, there is no electricity. When you sit in the back, you can't hear anything. You just sit. Now remember, there is a good amount of negative emotions inside you. All these people, why are they worthy to sit up front? And you got to get rid of the envy and jealousy and anger. You can't have any emotions, any thoughts that could potentially interfere with the lessons that you're going to be given in the future. There are no other lecture hall he goes to. There are no other teachers he loves. His relationship is one of monogamy, and that is what the spiritual quest is. You can't love Moses, Buddha, and Jesus all at the same time while still being an idiot. It doesn't work. After 5-6 more months, now he sits in the middle of the lecture hall. After 5 or 6 more months, now he sits in the front of the lecture hall. And now, remember, he keeps graduating. Now when he sits at the very front, something really strange happens to the student. He says, yes, I am worthy. Now the teacher looks at me and sees that I am ready to listen, to hear, and to understand. So he goes the following day to the lecture hall. But what he doesn't know is that the teacher told his community, when this guy comes in, push him out. I don't want to see his face. So he goes in, like the way he's been going for the past 20 years, but he is rejected by the community, by his friends. The only person that will accept him is his teacher. And after 3 or 4 or 5 days, the teacher looks at him and says, I'm sorry, who are you? I mean, who am I? I've been coming to your lecture hall, to the toilet bowls, to the kitchen for the past 25 years. Now you tell me who I am? You know who I am. I have no idea who you are. Now he feels completely abandoned. Another thing you need to know about good teachers: they will make you codependent. You will depend on them. They are your crutch. They are your sun. Without them, you can't breathe and you can't feel heat. Without them, your life is like this frozen sea of ice. When you're not with them, your life means nothing. You mean nothing. Now that the teacher has also rejected him, he says, 20 years I've worked with this man. It has meant nothing. I've made all the sacrifices, all this labor. For what? In sadness, tearfully, he walks to the cemetery and he cries. And he says, God, if there is such a thing out there, you know what I've gone through. And out of exhaustion, he falls asleep. And while asleep, he has a beautiful dream. And that dream is called the breakthrough. Truth, or God, or Atman, i.e. the self, reveals itself to this young man and says to it, the promised land has been reached. You are there now. You know what truth is. You may not be able to speak of it, but you know, you have this feeling. So, there needs to come a point where your teacher, like a very good parent, says, listen, from this point on, your ears can't hear anything new. You can't feel anything new. You need a different kind of depression. You need a different kind of loneliness. You need a different kind of abandonment. And all of that had to come through me. I was your son. I had to remove myself. So now you can go to the very source. And you can use your own language, whatever you're comfortable. God, Jesus, the Buddha, truth, nothingness, doesn't really matter. So, that's how students are made. Do you have any questions? Oscar.
The list of accomplishments said that after 20 years in the military, does he get the break with the? I'm not really sure. Like, I don't really understand.
That's a really good question. I don't think I can answer it. Maybe I can give it to you this way. And it may or may not be related. You decide that. The example I gave last night about me having cancer, stage 4. Basically, all of my dreams have come to an end. And I'm going to struggle with the fact that I will die. I'm going to leave a lot of things behind. And all of my dreams will be left incomplete. Unlike Gilgamesh, I know that I will be forgotten. And I'm going to review my life and I'll have this uneasy feeling that I've done a whole host of things that mean nothing. And I struggle. I go to various doctors, I look for various remedies, but nothing works. And I get really angry. Why me? I shouldn't die, my brother should. I mean, look at him. I pray, let me live another 2 years. I'll try to live a more meaningful life. I'll be more honest, more decent, more compassionate, more forgiving. It doesn't work. Cancer remains when I'm in pain every single day. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how it happens, why it happens. I mean, sure, I go through the depression and all that. I wake up one morning and I say, you know what? I did the best I could with life. And I'm happy. That's the breakthrough. That's the promised land. I'm not going to fight cancer anymore. I'm not going to fight the doctors anymore. I'm not going to fight the dreams anymore. And I'm going to look at my kids and my wife and say, oh, that's just the way things are. Let's just enjoy what few minutes we have left. I've come to accept. Now, the cancer is there. I will still be forgotten. My dreams will never flourish. But I'm okay with all of it. I don't know what the guy dreamt about. You know, it's kind of like what my mother's cousin went through. He heard this voice telling him to stay with this man. Maybe it was a figment of his imagination. I don't really know. But what I do know is that he came to accept the fact that his life, 50 years, meant nothing. He gave everything up. And when you look at him now, let me just say, at the end of all of that, he's blind. His wife is in an institution. His daughter will eventually end up in an institution. And he'll die a miserable death. My own teacher, he died a miserable death. He had cancer. In pain all the time. And that's what Aldous Huxley talked about some years ago. It doesn't really matter what a great sage or a great human being you are. Eventually, sickness, vomit are going to be your most faithful companions. That's your destiny. Sickness and vomit. I guess the promised land really at different stages is simply, you simply accept. Yeah. You know, Al Gore and George Bush, he simply accepted the fact that he lost to Bush. You know, versus Trump. He's never going to reach the promised land. He simply can't accept the fact that another person just beat him. And I guess the promised land is you just accept your life the way it is. Not by understanding it really well. That's all. Anyone else? Tomorrow, we'll talk about four kinds of teachers and four kinds of different students. And then we'll talk about Buddhism. Have a nice evening. Stay safe. Take care.